The opening round of the college football playoff, the first ever 12-team playoff, is in the books. We have our rapid reaction on today's show, and the quarterfinal rounds are set. We'll also talk about Jake Dickert's exit from Washington State. Where do the Cougars turn now? I'm John Canzano. You can read me at johncanzano.com. He's John Wilner. Find him at wilnerhotline.com. Let's dive right in, Wilner. That opening round, give me your reaction as you watch those games on Friday night and Saturday.
The closest game was the Texas-Clemson, 14-point differential. I mean, it was just one blowout after another. But that's not all that much different than what we got during the 14 playoff. There was a lot of years where both semifinals, or at least one in the 14 playoff, were blowouts. So, I mean, I have a lot of thoughts that we can get into about the process and the format. But, I mean, on-campus environment looked great, but from a competitive standpoint, not good.
Yeah, it was neat to see games on campuses, meaningful games played on campuses. I thought some of what we saw in the first round kind of affirmed some suspicions. Like, I think a lot of us suspected that Indiana wasn't as good as those other teams that were in the bracket. I think that got affirmed in watching them on Friday night. But, I heard a lot of belly aching from people going, oh, this wasn't entertaining. This wasn't compelling. But it's not all that different than sometimes the opening round of the NCAA tournament on a Thursday, where the morning session just kind of goes as it's seeded, So I need a bigger sample size. I'm still eager to see what happens in the quarterfinals and beyond. And, I need to see a couple of these tournaments to know, if we really can sort of wave off the opening round. But yeah, I mean, there wasn't a lot of drama, right? No. I was having a hard time staying with a few of those games.
Well, and it's going to be very interesting. I guess it won't be Wednesday because of Christmas, but Thursday or Friday, we'll get the TV ratings. And not only will we get the TV ratings for the games that were on the Turner networks, the first two games on Saturday, and I think that, some people probably flipped on ESPN and like, well, where are the games? But we will also get to compare them to the NFL games. And my sense is that it's going to be a wipeout. So from that standpoint, from a TV viewership, TV compelling theater, not good. And it makes you wonder longer term, right? If they talk about expanding to 14 or expanding to 16, I mean, is ESPN going to be interested in more early round games? I don't know.
Well, just some of that, because we talked about the bowl season and how ESPN owns 17 of those bowl games, and they've got TV contracts on most of the other games. And some of that maybe gets me thinking about, the bowl season, and could you expand the thing, and could you appease ESPN by making some of those opening round games in December, some of those early bowl games that we are traditionally seeing, with some teams now that are, opting out and have a bunch of attrition on their roster. But I still want to give this thing a chance. I still thought, Friday night, I was excited to see Notre Dame hosting a game against Indiana. Weird 5 minutes to start that game. Yeah, you heard Rocky Top played at, in Columbus, Ohio. There were some different things going on. And to Clemson's credit, like Dabo Swinney's been in big games, like they looked more equipped for that stage. There's a saying in theater, like the stage is too big for the play. I felt like in a couple cases here, like Indiana specifically, the stage was just too big. SMU, the stage was too big. They're not ready for it yet, but it gives them a taste of it. And now they know, what they need to go do in the off season and the portal and in years moving forward. So I'm not ready to wave it off like some are, but
the other thing that's too big, the lines of scrimmage, right? I mean, you get in the playoff and the teams that have the NFL draft picks on the offensive and defensive lines are gonna advance. And I thought we saw that in all four games. The team that had more blue chip players on the lines of scrimmage won handily. And that, I mean, that's not new in college football, but it's just more pronounced now because you're dealing with 12 teams instead of just 4. But from a competitive standpoint, they were mismatches.
Yeah, in Ohio State, like we had talked about this last week, there was a real risk that Ohio State crowd was going to turn on Ryan Day if things didn't go right early. So Ohio State got exactly what it needed.
Yep.
Ryan Day got exactly what he needed. They looked like a team that was capable of winning the tournament, right? They looked like a championship caliber team. And, to Penn State's credit, Penn State controlled the line of scrimmage against Oregon in the Big Ten championship game. And Penn State came out with a knockout punch. And Notre Dame, just on both sides of the ball, the Irish just dominated Indiana on Friday night. And so, yeah, you're right about, it comes down to big guys beat up little guys, as Chip Kelly likes to say. Right. I asked him one time about playoff football and the physicality at the line of scrimmage, and he said big people beat up little people.
They do.
That was his way of putting it.
I did come away thinking, and this was not something, it was certainly not the first time, but what happened just kind of confirmed my belief that they need to change the format. They cannot be beholden to giving the top four seeds to the conference champions, right? They just need to see the teams based on the rankings. And if you had done that, there would have been different matchups, and we may have seen some more competitive games if it had been a true seed tournament. Some of these opening round games might have been a little bit better. There's just no reason that Arizona State and Boise State should have buys. I don't think.
Well, they're trying to find some way to reward people for playing in that conference championship game. Otherwise, why even play in it? And I'm really curious because I'm a sample size person. Like I need more. I need to see more than just through this little keyhole that we looked at the first round. Because part of it is, as we move towards the quarterfinals, is going to be, what is that 24-day layoff? What is the value of it? Is it a valuable thing that Oregon is sitting for 24 days between games? Is it valuable to Boise State and Arizona State? We're going to find out, right? And Georgia, we're going to find out. Or is there a rust factor and it's really a non-issue because, hey, these teams still get 10, 11 days between games. That's plenty of time to prepare. So I'm really curious to see how the quarterfinals kind of shape up. I want to put up just a little graphic here. Let's take a look at this. Wilner, where do your eyes go as you kind of look at, the quarterfinal matchups?
I look at the two heavyweight games, right? Ohio State, Oregon, and I mean two of the top 3 or 4 most talented teams in the country for sure, and then Notre Dame, Georgia, which should be very compelling, especially if Georgia doesn't have Carson Beck, right? But those are the games that are with Boise State and ASU. Those teams have had great seasons, but that doesn't strike you necessarily as heavyweight on heavyweight the way those other two do. So we'll see. There were no upsets in the opening round. We'll see if there's an upset in the quarterfinals. And to be honest, I haven't looked to see what the point spread is. I have to imagine the Ohio State-Oregon game is pretty close to a pick.
Yeah, I looked immediately just to see what the first line I could find was, and Ohio State is a 1.5-point favorite on the first line that I saw. And so here you are, the number 1 seed in the tournament is a underdog playing at a neutral site.
Well,
at least with that first line that comes out.
We talked about this, right? Yeah. I mean, this is one of my things. It's not just Oregon. It's whoever that number 1 is does not have enough of an advantage. They didn't get a home game. They got to play Ohio State, right? If you lose and you're 5 seed and you're Texas, you play Clemson at home, and then you're playing ASU. And Oregon, if they win that game against Ohio State, they'd have to play Texas in the Cotton Bowl. And so we've talked about this. That's the other thing. In addition to seeding based on ranking, they got to figure out a way to reward the number 1 and the number 2 seed probably more than this format does.
Yeah, and look, we're going to show some financials later in the show, but think about this. Oregon will play Ohio State in the Rose Bowl in the quarterfinal. They win that game. Presumably, they will get Texas in the semifinal. And then if the seeding plays out, they'll get Georgia in the national championship game. Guess what? Those are the 3 teams in the bracket that are spending the most money, 1, 2, and 3 as athletic departments. So the 1 seed's got to go through about $600 million in expenditures in athletic departments to get a national championship. And so, I feel like some of this stuff should have been played out, with Oregon having the easier path. I think they got the tougher bracket and they got a brutal path there. But that Oregon-Ohio State game, Ohio State wants that game. Bill Rabinowitz, who is the beat reporter who covers Ohio State for the Columbus Dispatch. I asked him, prior to the Big Ten championship game, and he said Ohio State really, 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 really wants to play that game. They really wanted Oregon, and yet they lost to Michigan and cost themselves a chance to get it. But they got the rematch that they wanted. They earned it by beating Tennessee. They'll get another shot at Oregon, and Dan Lanning and the Ducks, I think they're feeling good about being on the West Coast at the Rose Bowl. They got some rest, but I have that one circled. I mean, obviously I'll be at that game, and it's going to be a huge one. I am interested though to see Boise State mix it up. Right? Ashton Genty on with extra rest. What can he be like? And if we're gonna get a little bit of a thrill in this bracket, I think it's going to come with that Boise State game in the Fiesta Bowl. And I kind of have that one circled as well, because I'm just curious to see how that one plays out.
You don't think ASU's got much chance against Texas then?
I mean, look, Kenny Dillingham, he's liable to tear a goalpost down himself. I mean, come on.
True.
I'm not counting him out, but Genty has not been 100% down the stretch in the second half of the season, and he's still rushing for 200 yards here, $150 there. And I really am curious to see him fresh and rested against, a very physical defense. And so I am curious to see how that one plays out.
Both Boise State and Arizona State have big, big challenges up front, right? I mean, we saw Texas, their offensive line just demolished Clemson's front seven. I think the Longhorns ran for close to 200 yards. And so ASU's defense is going to have to, they're going to have to play the best game they have played by a factor of 10. And Texas has got a fantastic defense. So it'll be interesting to see if Cam Scadaboo can get going. But it is nice to see these type of games, teams that wouldn't have had this chance. Now they do. But it is a tall order, right? There's the upper echelon of teams with those blue chip players, and then there's everybody else.
Yeah, but if this tournament's going to deliver in the way the NCAA tournament does, keep an eye on those games. We all have to watch it. We have to see it play out. But you're hitting on something when you talk about those big defensive tackles. The theme of the opening round: it takes money to win. I want to put a little graphic up just to kind of underscore that. When you look at
podcast going next level here with graphics.
Yeah, we are going next level if I can get there. But look, here it is. Here are the financials.
Oh my goodness.
The teams left in the bracket. On that note, as it takes money to win, Notre Dame's a private school, so we don't have their financials. But Ohio State's athletic department outspending everybody in the country, $251.6 million in the last fiscal year. Ohio State's 1 in the country. Texas is 2. Georgia is 5. And then look at little old Boise State down there at the bottom. Their football program, by the way, at Boise State spends $24 million. Ohio State's football program spends $70 million plus.
Yep.
So you tell me what you see there.
Well, the interesting thing there is, right, the percentage of the total budget taken up by football is actually higher at Boise than it is at Ohio State. And yet Ohio State's football budget is basically 3x Boise's, right?
Yeah.
And some of this too has to do with the number of sports you're sponsoring. Ohio State, one of the broadest based athletic departments in the country. I want to say they got 35, 36 sports, right? Stanford's probably the only one up there. But that has something to do with your budget, but it's also, it's TV money. It's selling 100,000 season tickets for football. It's fundraising. And it's like anything else, if you invest properly, you got a better chance to win.
Well, we had Jeremiah Dickey on last week, right? On the episode, the Boise State AD, and he alluded to it. He said, he felt like Ohio State probably spent more on football than they spent in their entire athletic department. And he wasn't kidding.
No,
it wasn't, there's an extra $25 million, $24 million there. But look, it's going to get worse next year.
Great.
We're going to be talking about revenue sharing plus NIL.
Yep.
And, there's even some schools that are Power 4 schools that are saying, hey, we're only going to share $15 million of revenue with our athletes. And maybe they come up with another $10 million in NIL money. That's still $25 million that is earmarked for their roster. And so I do wonder about the gap between the haves and the have-nots, Wilner, is, how many teams that are, group of 5 schools will be able to fund their athletic department at a level or play money ball at a level that gets them a roster that has a puncher's chance in this tournament.
For sure. And also there's the new playoff format that starts with the 2026 season. That's the new contract with ESPN. So the revenue distribution model is changing, and the SEC and Big Ten will get the overwhelming majority of the revenue from the new CFP, and that will only enhance the disparity in athletic department budgets between those two conferences and everybody else. And that includes the ACC and Big 12. They are going to be far behind the SEC and Big Ten.
Yeah, 29% of that new contract to the Big Ten and the SEC. They get 29% each, so 58% of the contract going to those two conferences. The ACC is getting 17%, Big 12 is getting 15%. The group of 5, sharing the leftover 10%, and Oregon State and Washington State down there for the time being getting $3.6 million each. That's just, just to give you an example, an SEC school or a Big Ten school is going to get about a $20 million check in 2026. And Oregon State, Washington State are going to get $3.6 million. So good luck when you get out onto the field. You're really going to have to play money ball. And that kind of leads us to our next topic. I had a one-on-one interview with Jake Dickert. You can read it at johncanzano.com if you want, but Dickert talked about the finances at Washington State, and it really does paint the picture that his decision to leave Washington State for Wake Forest is rooted in dollars and cents. And people are mad at him. They're frustrated at him. But look, it sounds to me like the Washington State needs to do some soul searching on the financial front.
It's a special place with a lot of spirit and a unique passion. And we just they got to embody that more. But the investment piece is now what college athletics is about, period. And that's investing in coaches and people. Like, it's now people capital. And to continue to do that and to maintain that has been difficult.
What do you make of all that, Wilner?
Well, I'd say it is Washington State's board of regents. Kirk Schultz, who's president of the system, he's retiring this summer. It is really, are they going to spend the money? Are they going to agree to spend the money to make Washington State football competitive in the rebuilt Pac-12 or not? It is entirely, I think, on the regents, and Washington State fans ought to be paying close attention to what's going on, because if they don't step up, the Cougars, not only are they not going to be able to compete with the Big 12 and the ACC, they're not going to be able to compete in the rebuilt Pac-12 because, Boise's going to spend to win.
Yeah.
And it seems to me like Oregon State's willing to spend.
Yes. Oregon State says they're going to fund like a Power 5, right? They're going to use part of that settlement money. They're going to continue to subsidize their media rights dollars that they're not getting with that settlement money. San Diego State's going to spend. Boise State's going to spend. Here's a dirty little secret, though, Wilner. I have sources at Washington State tell me that the regents are on board with spending, and that the athletic director, Ann McCoy, is on board with spending, and that the holdup really is in the president's office with Kirk Schultz. And that surprises me because I have long viewed him as a pro sports guy. And I thought with a lame duck president, this should be easy. Like, they can just rubber stamp, they should be spending, but the holdup seems to be in the president's office, not with the regents. And I even communicated with Schultz, and he said the regents are not the issue. He told me, he said, fans want everyone to spend, but that means that you're taking dollars from the College of Business, College of Medicine. And, that's not the tune that presidents in the SEC and the Big Ten are right now.
But he's stepping aside. So when he's gone, right, the onus is going to be on the regents to set the direction, to hire a president, not only of the system. There is a chancellor of the Pullman campus. Everybody's got to be on board, and the direction starts at the top.
Problem is, you got to make the hire before he steps aside. So can the regents step around the president's office? Because it seems that Kirk Schultz is really trying to be fiscally responsible. And yes, there's an argument to be made that the campus should not be subsidizing athletics, but you have to look over at Boise State, San Diego State, Oregon State right now, and you go, okay, if you go on the cheap with this coaching hire and you don't have your assistant coach salary pool at least be what it was under Jake Dickert, look what they did with Kyle Smith in basketball. He was making like 1.3, 1.4 million. His replacement is now making 600,000. They did not take that savings and slide it into football like a lot of other places did. They just kept it for their bottom line. So I do think there's some concern there. And I think, I respect what Schultz is trying to do, but he needs to look around. And I think he needs to, ask himself, is the legacy that he wants to leave the legacy that, Washington State got left behind in the last few months of his tenure? I don't think that he wants that on his resume.
Who do you think they should hire? What do you think they should do? Oh yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
We got
look, I think they've got to do what everybody else is doing. That I think you have to go out and you have to find an angle. Like North Carolina going after Bill Belichick. I don't know if it's going to work, but it's an angle. You're taking a shot. You're going with the pro guy who's trying to build an NFL team, and you're going to get a bunch of donors excited about NIL money. You look at Michael Vick to Norfolk State, same thing, trying to get an angle and find an angle. Everybody's trying to find that next Coach Prime like hire. Guy that immediately came to mind, frequent guest of us on this podcast. How about Rick Neuheisel? Try that one on, Wilner. Would Washington State hire a Washington guy?
Well, Washington guy, UCLA guy, Colorado guy.
Right.
That's an interesting thought. He has been out of coaching, well, certainly out of college coaching since he was dismissed by the Bruins about more than a decade ago. I don't know.
Games changed, though. The game's changed. This is about NIL dollars and your ability to get donors excited and bring outside entities.
That's a big piece of it, getting the donors excited. Yeah. I mean, there's kind of two models that have been successful recently. One is, going after the veteran coach, Bronco Mendenhall, right? Yeah. Mexico hires him. That works. He goes to Utah State. Or do you go with the young guy, another Dickert, or a Kenny Dillingham, Dan Lanning type, who really relates to the players, gets the whole NIL thing. I don't know what they're going to do. I do think that if they're willing to pay a competitive salary, there's some good options. There are good options at the FCS level in the Big Sky alone.
Yeah.
Those guys can coach.
I go to Montana State today. I bring that guy in right now and have a conversation.
Montana State, the Dakotas, those guys are all good coaches. And we've seen Kalen DeBoer, Lance Leipold at Kansas. The guys who win at multiple levels are smart hires. So we'll see what they do. I think if they spend the money, again, it gets back to money. If they spend the money, they're going to get a good coach.
Yeah, but I'm bringing Neuheisel in for a chat at least. Okay?
Yeah,
because I think if nothing else, like maybe you bring him in as your player personnel guy. Maybe you bring him because I think now it's about, it's different. It's, I don't mind that he's out of coaching. I think he moves the needle. And so Bill Belichick had not coached in college, but he moves the needle. Yeah. So you find an angle and you go with it. But my fear is that they're not going to have the money to go after a good coach, a good staff. And so they may have to turn to the FCS level because somebody who's looking for a stepping stone job may consider Washington State. And that may be all they have.
Maybe all they have. Did you sense that the frustration and anger Washington State fans have about Dickert leaving, does it remind you at all about Oregon State, Jonathan Smith fans?
Yeah, it does. But I think after talking to Dickert, I felt like he really wanted to be there. And I think he wanted to stay at Washington State. And I think he was facing a couple of different things. One, he'd had his quarterback get in the portal 2 consecutive years. They've got about $1 million to spend in NIL money at Washington State. It is not enough to retain a Cam Ward or a John Mateer. And I think if John Mateer stays at Washington State, I think Jake Dickert's still there. So I think it comes down to a move like that. And then the second thing is, he had to replace both coordinators, 2 seasons ago, and now he's doing it all over again.
Yeah.
And the way that Dickert coaches, like it or not, he is an emotional guy who has got tears in his eyes and his voice is raspy after games. His highs are high, his lows are lows. And I think that you look at him and you go, that is a guy who I just think had enough. He had enough of feeling like he didn't have the resources and couldn't get it done. He wouldn't say it, but in that one-on-one, he all but said it, that, he's going to Wake Forest because they've got more resources.
Well, that's the story for everybody. Jonathan Smith went to Michigan State, more resources. I mean, Kalen DeBoer went to Alabama, more resources. Jed Fish, Arizona to Washington, more resources. They're all trying to move up, right?
Yeah.
Everybody wants to get as high as they can on the resource tradition scale, right? And Dickert is not doing anything different.
I appreciate everybody who's watching this podcast on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button and make a commitment and give us a like and share it with other people. And we'll be back next week. Or will we be back next week? Yeah, we'll be back next week because we've got the quarterfinal rounds that are coming up. And it's going to be a lot of fun to watch the quarterfinals. We'll have an episode right out of the quarterfinals for you. I'm John Canzano. You know where to find me, johncanzano.com. He's John Wilner. Find him at wilnerhotline.com.
Thanks, and happy holidays, everyone. Thanks so much for your loyalty and support. Happy New Year as well, and we will see you on the other side.
Merry Christmas.